Welcome to this explainer. I'm talking to you today not just as your guide, but as a deeply weary, broken knight, a guy who has finally seen the absolute end of the road. We spend our lives, right, just burning through kinetic energy, swinging our swords, fighting for meaning, driven by this massive, unyielding will to power. But what happens when that energy burns out? Today we are looking at the Sapphire Forge. Now, this facility doesn't run on coal. It doesn't need the heat of a dying star to bend reality to its anvil. No. As we'll see, it runs on the data of concluded narratives. It literally runs on the closed loops of lives that have finally just surrendered, giving into the absolute stillness of structural optimization.
Which brings us to this stark, frankly horrifying realization. I thought my sword would leave a mark on eternity. I didn't know eternity was just a ledger. That is the cold truth, isn't it? The universe is completely indifferent to our passions. We build up these grand narratives of conquest, of love, of tragic heroism. We really think we're shaping the cosmos. But the cosmos, it's merely waiting for our kinetic energy to expire so it can tally the sum. Eternity isn't some grand hall of heroes. It's a bookkeeper's desk. Consider the number 82.4. Specifically, 82.4 kilograms. This is the exact mass input of everything I was: my biological tissue, the iron oxide of my rusted armor, the oxidized cloth of my tunic, and, well, the concentrated sorrow that made up my entire exhausting existence. A whole lifetime of weeping over shattered vows, of screaming into the void, all perfectly quantified. It's a crushing blow to the ego, isn't it? To realize your entire universe, your grand tragedy, just weighs 82.4 kilograms on the universal scale. Moving on to Section 1, we'll be looking at the illusion of honor and the weight of a broken lineage. So, let's dive into this chaotic illusion we once called life. You know, we gave our suffering beautiful names, like duty or legacy. We wrapped our sheer exhaustion in the romanticism of a broken lineage just to make the suffering bearable. It was this deeply emotional Dionysian struggle of unchecked passion against the inevitable, but the Forge sees it completely differently. It uses this fascinating, if deeply cynical definition in its records: narrative inertia. The Forge describes it as a localized resistance to entropy, the universe's natural decay through a cognitive loop known as honor. Think about that from a Nietzschean perspective for a second. Our desperate will to power, our clinging to knightly honor, was really just a stubborn cognitive loop, a localized temporary resistance against the inevitable unmaking of the universe. We thought honor was an objective divine law. The Forge sees it merely as friction, just a delay in the arithmetic. Listen to this observation from the entity that actually oversees this unmaking, the Jester of Sapphire Light. They spend decades tearing across continents, shouting their names at the sky. They carry the universe on their backs like a punishment. We think we're the masters of our fate, right? The Ubermensch, carving our will into reality. But actually, we're just beasts of burden, carrying the heavy, rusted weight of our own self-importance. It is a tragic, exhausting romanticism. We weep over broken swords, thinking the universe mourns with us. It really doesn't. Which takes us to Section 2, the arithmetic of existence and the void ledger. Let's step away from the chaos of human emotion for a moment and look at the Apollonian absolute order, the cold, structured logic of the void ledger. At the center of the Forge sits this massive, monolithic register. It's carved from a zero-point crystalline matrix. And it doesn't use ink. Its pages are literally sheets of frozen gravitational waves. This brilliantly illustrates the ultimate clash at the heart of existence. On one side, we have our chaotic human narrative, all that sorrow, the kinetic energy, the desperate resistance, the weeping. On the other side, the cold, thermodynamic reality of the void ledger, zero-point matrix, structural optimization, frozen gravitational waves. It's the eternal battle between the messy reality of living and the pristine, mathematical perfection of nothingness. It's genuinely chilling to see a literal lifetime of suffering reduced to a single line item. Log entry 884912, recorded by the Jester with a finger of coherent blue light. There I am. Subject designation, errant component. Mass input, 82.4 kilograms. Narrative inertia, high. All my stubborn honor, my absolute refusal to yield, simply cataloged as a high resistance to entropy. The crystalline page ripples, and your entire, messy life is calmly accepted as raw numerical data. Now, in Section 3, we're covering forging chaos into data and the extraction method itself. Okay, so we're entering the chilling reality of the extraction chamber. Imagine the jester standing there, the cold plasma of his limbs casting long, twitching shadows across the floorboards. This is where our chaotic lives are metabolized. Let me walk you through the horrifyingly efficient steps the Forge uses to transform chaotic human experiences into completely symmetrical patterns. Step 1. Thermal volatilization of identity. Think about the psychological horror of that for a second. The fire doesn't burn your flesh, it burns away who you are. Your ego, your memories, your grudges just evaporated. Step 2. Metabolic reduction to a uniform, non-reactive slurry. All the chaos of humanity is totally neutralized. And finally, Step 3. Product realization of a high-density polished silicate artifact. The Forge strips away every single chaotic impulse and replaces it with pure, undisturbed form.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is this brutal percentage, 99.987%. That is the total efficiency yield of the extraction method. That's how effectively the Forge can convert a wildly unpredictable, tragic human destiny into a uniform structural zero state. Almost 100% of your sorrow and kinetic energy is successfully scrubbed from the universe. Incredible, right? Moving into section 4, we look at the finality of symmetry and what they call an arithmetic miracle. Standing in the pale ambient glare of the Forge, a cold, mechanical laughter bubbles up from the jester. It's this dry, rhythmic friction that just rattles the heavy glass pages of the ledger. He's the observer of our ultimate nihilism, watching us finally beautifully quiet down. And he murmurs this to the empty room. They always believe the hardest part is the dying. They never realize the true miracle is the arithmetic. We knights always thought our final defeat would be a glorious death in battle, a grand conclusion to our heroic narrative. But the true, chilling realization is that our end is simply a meticulously closed mathematical loop. The universe honestly doesn't care that you died. It only cares that your mass energy balance has been successfully accounted for. And that brings us to section 5, the silent blue gem and absolute zero. So what are we actually left with? Well, look to the final product, a silent blue gem. The jester's belt hangs heavy, clinking softly with the residue of 1,000 lands, a rusted suit of armor, and a tragic destiny, all polished into a single stone. And you want to know the most terrifying part? It's entirely identical to 300 other stones hanging right next to it. In the end, despite our desperate will to be unique, we all become the exact same structural perfection, zero. Within this condensed autobiography, the internal consciousness voltage registers at absolute zero. There's no smoke trapped inside. There's no flicker of memory. The crushing weight of who the knight was has been solved by simply making him nothing at all. Those tears that rusted my armor, they've been perfectly converted into pure structural clarity. Just to summarize this absolute end state for you, the chaos of tears is fully converted to crystalline clarity. The jester unhooks the blue gem and carefully slots it into a custom-bored recess on the cover of the ledger. It clicks into place, joining a grid of silent blue stars. And then there's the heavy, definitive thud of the ledger closing. Honestly, it sounds like a massive hydraulic press. In the profound silence of the void, the story is finished. Not because the night one is war, mind you, but because the mass energy balance is perfectly equalized. Which leaves us with this final haunting question. As you sit there, expending your own kinetic energy, fighting your own desperate, chaotic battles, really ask yourself, is it a tragedy to be unmade into perfect, symmetrical silence? Or, after carrying the crushing weight of the universe on your back for an entire lifetime, is the cold, absolute arithmetic of the void ledger the only true mercy we will ever know? Keep swinging your sword if you must, but remember, the ledger is waiting.